I decided to do my oral presentation on the thinking critically about suicide at Foxconn. I know we just did a case study on it, but I felt like this was a very important issue that needs to be addressed. And so one of the biggest things, just a little bit overview about what Foxconn is. Foxconn is one of the world's largest manufacturing companies. You know, they manufacture products for like Dell, Nintendo, and the biggest one being Apple and Microsoft. And so it's talking about mainly what it focuses on. It's the working condition in particular. So we all know that when companies actually take their business overseas, they're doing it because there's cheap labor, less regulations they have to follow that compared to if they would manufacture or produce their products here in the U.S. So I found this was a very interesting case study that we did, and I was really intrigued, actually, very shocked as well by the results. And it's basically just talking about how there was a period of time in 2010 where Foxconn was faced a very big trouble with their employees committing suicide because of the working conditions they were having to endure at the workplace. And so, I mean, that's a big topic to even talk about. Suicide by itself, it's already a big issue. But, when it comes down to suicide because of the work conditions, that just takes it to a whole nother level. And I feel like companies need to be more ethically responsible for causing this, especially Foxconn. So I decided to address a couple more issues. So it was said that after the suicides happened, Foxconn decided to put nets around the buildings, around the 15-story buildings, so that to kind of prevent from their employees kind of jumping out. I'm sorry, and I feel like this was not a sufficient solution to the problem. It addresses one issue, but it's just trying to cover up the sun with a thumb, So it's just not all there. So I feel like Foxconn needs to be held responsible, and they should be held responsible for what the working conditions that they're putting. So on the article it stated that they pay minimum wage. It said they offered food and numerous activities for employees to enjoy. But I feel like that's kind of like stretching the truth, if you might say. So Foxconn definitely has not done enough to prevent future suicide attempts. They've actually just tackled one side of the issue, but the big issue is still being out there. And, it's the conditions that the employees are put through. I read an article when I was doing some research that talked about how they were forced to long periods of time. They were constantly switching shifts, so sometimes employees will work in the morning, other day they will work at night. So they never have a consistent shift. And then even bunking, they would sleep there, what they call Foxconn City. I mean, it's nice to have a company that would be that big, but you would expect with a company being so big and making so much money that they would actually focus on expanding and trying to make the work conditions for their employees a lot better than they actually are. But unfortunately, that's in China, and I feel like if this was to be here in the United States, it will be completely shut down. Anything operation like that with in the case it talks about. I believe her name was Ma. I'm just gonna call her Ma because I'm sorry I can't pronounce her last name, but it's talking about Ma. She committed suicide, and unfortunately, she was in a month. She already had worked 258 hours, and I mean then 112 of those hours were already overtime. So that's just crazy working conditions. Working 11 hours straight, 7 days a week. So, they're doing about a 77-hour work week, where, here in the U.S., a 40-hour work week is about normal. So pretty much they're almost working about double as what we work. And, it's sad. It's definitely sad because, big companies like Apple who make, I just read also as well, not being considered a $1 trillion company, that, you know, they outsource their manufacturing products, you know, to like overseas, so where they can get a lot more cheap labor, less regulations for the companies that actually produce that. So I feel like companies like Apple and all those Microsoft and like Nintendo, they need to be held a little bit more responsible and make ethical decisions when they decide to like manufacture their parts or even products overseas. Actually do some research, see what the working conditions are, make sure there's no child labor being exposed, you know, or just employees being exploited, you know, just working crazy hours or anything like that. And so that kind of addressed my other issue, that's talking about that Apple says that they are committed to addressing the working conditions that at Foxconn factories. You know, what they put it is no worse than any other factory in China. And if you think about that statement, that's not a very good statement, because no worse than any factory in China, that definitely has to be, you know, it seems like people already come accustomed to that theory, you know. Every time you think about a factory in China, or, you know, in another country, in a poor country, you think about child labor. You think about people being exploited, you know, working crazy conditions, hot weather, just anything you can think of. So, you know, I feel like Apple needs to do a little bit more, you know. They're a $1 trillion company. $1 trillion company. They're definitely one of the most largest companies in the world, actually. So for them to say they're going to address an issue and actually do something about it is completely different. So I feel like Apple definitely needs to step it up. You know, they produce millions and billions of dollars worth of like iPhones and iPads and other Apple products, that I feel like they should be able to bring some of all that manufacturing, producing of the products here to the U.S., you know, put a little bit more into the economy, and at the same time have a little peace of mind that it's being done in an ethical manner. And then the other question I wanted to kind of address was like, I do think that if Foxconn's response to if Foxconn's response to the issue that they were having with, you know, like the suicide attempts and the hard working conditions, is it a proactive or a reactive ethics? I am gonna say, for their solutions, like what they did after it happened, unfortunately, you know, it did take for, you know, people to commit suicide and stuff like that. I feel like it did lead them for a little bit on the proactive side, just, you know, trying to create issues, bringing in counselors. I even saw that they were even doing pay increases and just kind of like trying to help out the situation. But at the end of the day, you know, I do think it's more of a reactive ethics, because they're waiting for the problem to present itself before they can for them to actually find a solution, whether they need to be doing stuff to prevent all these issues from happening. So, you know, if they would have shorter work weeks, better working conditions and stuff like that, this would definitely help them, compared to for, you know, just waiting for stuff to have like this to happen, like what happened in 2010, people trying to commit suicide and stuff like that. So it's a little bit in the middle in my opinion, but I mean, definitely, you know, I've read a couple articles as well that also like working conditions actually did not improve even, you know, years after 2010 when the unfortunate events happened. They have not improved much, but I feel like even the countries like China needs to take more responsibility into making sure that their companies know what the policies they need to follow, or even, you know, just start enforcing policies all throughout the country. Thank you for your time, and this has been my presentation.